Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the Zeiss 28mm f2.8, and I'm going to talk a little bit just about the 28mm focal length and that aperture combination in general. So basically, to me, 28mm is kind of like the latest trendy kind of street photography focal length, and there's nothing wrong with that. I feel like maybe it feels like all the famous photos in, like, I don't know, the 50s and 60s, 70s taken with like the 50mm lens, like Henri Cartier-Bresson type photos. He used a 50mm. A lot of the documentary and photojournalism was taken with 50mm lenses as well. And then, like, after that, maybe you have like Joel Meyerowitz type street photographers who use like 35mm, as far as I know, for the most part. I mean, it's not like 28mm is a new focal length. It's been around for a long time, but I think like the popularity of like the Ricoh GR and stuff like that on YouTube has probably made it kind of like the latest, how do I say this? It's kind of like the midlife crisis focal length. Like, lots of people who shoot like more narrow street photography focal lengths, like, they feel like their photos aren't interesting enough, or they can't include what they want in their photos. And the solution to that is never to go wider or to just spend your money on going different places. It's to go down and get a wider focal length, because that's what they read on the internet. And I mean, I'm guilty of this, and I personally, I love the 28mm focal length. I'm just saying that you don't need to have 28mm, or you don't need to have a wide angle to take interesting photos. And this is like an $800 to like $1,100 lens, and you could spend that money, you know, going places and doing things. Gear is not the beginning and the end. It's more what you do with the lenses, obviously. Also, I'll say that, like, it's an unfortunate fact of life that 28mm and f2.8 means you're not going to get any bokeh, which is fine. But that also means that all your photos kind of look like they were taken on an iPhone and then run through a VSCO filter with grain, which is also fine. But I mean, just keep in mind that there's a lot of photos taken in this focal length right now, because I mean, ever since, like, I believe the first iPhone had a 28mm. It's probably the most popular focal length on Earth, whether it seems like it or not. And that's because of smartphones. Alright, so now I'm going to talk about the optics and handling of this lens and the good and bad of each. So I'm going to start with the optics. The optics of the Zeiss Biogon 28mm f2.8 are pretty fantastic. Super low distortion, high contrast, super high sharpness. It's a great lens for the most part optically. I can guarantee that if you're shooting film on this lens, you will basically never notice a lack of sharpness. And if you can tease bokeh out of it by focusing super close, then it'll look okay. You can also focus down to 50 centimeters, which is a lot closer than most wide-angle Leica lenses, or Leica lenses in general. For the most part, the close focus distance is 70 centimeters. But after 70 centimeters, you will lose rangefinder coupling, which is a downside. That's not the fault of the lens, it's just the fault of the rangefinder and how rangefinders work. The bad part of the optics for me is that my copy of the lens, I can't say that it's this way for every copy, but my copy of the lens has pretty bad flaring. And it's not that noticeable outside of like a certain angle, but whenever it's there, it's really, really there. And if I was shooting professionally, it may be a bigger deal than it is for me. But I'm shooting pretty casually, so for me, it's just kind of a little plus. It gives the lens a little bit of character, I guess. As far as the handling goes, I'd also say that it's really good. The focus ring is smooth, and the aperture ring adjusts in third stops. It's super easy to focus. And also, the Zeiss lenses in the ZM range actually have consistency between each other in where the focus nub is while you're focusing. So in general, you can build up muscle memory if you keep using all the Zeiss lenses in the ZM range. That's never been like the biggest deal for me, but it's interesting. And I mentioned the focus nub just now. It does have a focus nub instead of Leica uses like what do you call it? And it's not the most comfortable thing to focus with, but it's not that bad either. The bad part of the handling is that the lens hood is gigantic, and it also focuses externally, which means that if you have your finger on the aperture ring ready to adjust that, and you're trying to focus, then it'll actually be difficult to adjust the focus back and forth. You have to take your finger off of the aperture ring, which is kind of annoying. So I'd really prefer it if it focused internally, but it's also not that big of a deal. It's never ruined any photos for me. It just gives the impression sometimes that the lens doesn't focus as smoothly as it actually does, which isn't great. Also, the shape of the glass on this lens is bulbous, which means that you can get dust stuck in the sides pretty easily, and it won't affect image quality, but it is kind of a pain to clean. So I'd recommend you use a UV filter with this lens and most lenses, but particularly for this shape of glass. I'll also say that the depth of field scale, aperture numbers, etc., are all very clearly inlaid and visible, so you're never going to have any problems with that. So basically, with camera focal lengths that aren't 50mm, you have three options: cheap, sharp, and fast, but you only get to pick two. And the market for Leica M mount 28mm kind of looks like this. I'll just go through some lenses starting at the cheapest. At the bottom, you have the 7 Artisans 28mm f1.4, which is fast and cheap, but it's not sharp. I personally don't really like this lens. My copy was really bad, but it still may be interesting if you're looking for something in that budget. Next, you have the Voigtlander Ultron 28mm f1.9 or f2. The f1.9 version, I believe, is L39 mount, and the f2 version is Leica M mount. This lens is less cheap, but it's also a lot sharper, but it's also less fast. Next, you have used Zeiss 28mm f2.8s, and for me, I think this is one of the best options, and it's personally what I bought. I bought my lens for about $700 or $800 used with a UV filter and the sun hood, and I think this is probably the best value that you can get right now whenever it comes to 28mm on Leica, because if you keep going up in the price range, the next big popular lens is the Leica 28mm Elmarit, which cost $2,500 new, and it's not as easy to find on the used market, and it's super sharp, but it's still not fast, and it's also not cheap. So you don't even get two of the three things, and that doesn't make it a worse lens, but it is small, not the greatest value, but it's a fantastic lens, and I desperately want one. So yeah, but if you're looking for an alternative to that lens that's cheaper, then I think this is what you should buy, and I highly recommend it. Thank you so much for watching. I make a lot of other videos. I make camera reviews, and I also have a series called Photo Books, where I talk about photo books and subjects related to photo books. So far, I have 2 videos in that series. The first one is about Daido Moriyama, and the second one is about the Dojukai apartments in Tokyo. And it's super interesting, so you should go check it out. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. And if you really enjoyed it, then you can buy me a coffee at the link in the description. And thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a good one.